Hey everyone, I'm Victoria Wiltshire and this is Songtradr Happy Hour. Welcome to everyone who's called, dialed, clicked or tuned in. Hopefully you've grabbed a drink and are nicely settled in. We've got a great panel for you today who I will introduce in just a moment. To our lovely audience, feel free to use the chat windows on Zoom and Facebook. I'm sure our panelists would love for you to say hi. For our question segment, which will be in the last 20 minutes or so, don't forget to drop your questions in the Q&A window on Zoom at any time or in the chat window on Facebook. As usual, we'll try to get to as many as we can, and we are very sorry if we don't get to yours. And now to our special guests. Our first is a titan of the music industry. He's pulled together more successful deals than I've had conversations with my cats, and that's saying something. He's the former head of Virgin Records, Warner Brothers Records, and EMI. From the world of artists, he's worked with Linkin, Josh Groban, Coldplay, the Red Hot Chili Peppers, Sex Pistols, and the Spice Girls, and the list goes longer than we have time. He was named Billboard's Music Exec of the Year in 2001, served on the boards of two heroes of the guitar universe, Fender and Gibson, and was vice chairman of the Grammy Foundation, a long-time defender of artist rights, a champion for restoring the value of music, and actually a really great guy. We are privileged to welcome Phil Quartararo. Hi.
Very nice to be here. Thank you.
Next.
Happy to be here.
Oh, wonderful. Next, she's lived and breathed creativity forever and had a very early introduction to the world of music. Now, many of us would have been quite content to learn an instrument or even two, but she worked her way through several in the string and woodwind families, then moved on to conquer the art of singing. By age 5, she had secured series regular and leading star roles on Lifetime, Disney, Nickelodeon, NBC, and WB. She signed to Ford Models, and you may have seen her on print ads for Nike, Yamaha, Guess, or Nordstrom. After graduating in visual arts with an honours bachelor's degree and a minor in African American studies at Harvard, she returned to LA to write screenplays and also writes and co-produces her own music. Very nice. Her latest single, Like Whoa, says it perfectly. Please say hello to the immensely talented Billy Bodega.
Hi, I'm so glad to be here.
So, completing our trio of fabulousness today, that's really hard to say actually, is a screen composer from the land that's a hop, skip, and a 15-hour plane ride away. It's also my home country, Australia. He has received Oscar nominations for Shine and Elizabeth, the latter for which he also won a BAFTA. This was his second BAFTA win, the first being for Strictly Ballroom. He also has a swag of wins and nominations for multiple features such as The Railway Man, starring Colin Firth and Nicole Kidman, Russell Crowe's The Water Diviner, The Dressmaker, starring the Queen of the Titanic herself, Kate Winslet, and Rachel Griffiths' Ride Like a Girl. On other work, his composition Eternity for orchestra, choir, and 1,000 tap dancers, can you imagine, was commissioned for the opening ceremony of the 2000 Sydney Olympics. His latest work can be heard soundtracking the riveting political thriller Escape from Pretoria, starring Daniel Radcliffe. I've had the privilege of listening to this guy at the piano. He doesn't just play the piano, he is the piano. I'm seriously proud to introduce you to a mate from Down Under. It's David Hirschfelder.
Yeah.
So our topic today is music through the ages, soundtrack or catalyst for change. A lot of words, but to get the conversation rolling, look, I think there wouldn't be too many of us who wouldn't have a memory or two of songs that remind us of significant moments in our lives, whether it's a graduation song or maybe what was playing on the radio during our first kiss. Turning to history, music has always played a key role, particularly during times of change, I think we agree. Phil, how about we start with you? In your career of many, many years, was there an artist or perhaps a genre that rose through a time of great change?
Yeah, well, I can remember there's always periods of music that are a reflection of what's going on in the world at any given time. And I became aware of that in the late 70s, living in New York through the disco era, which was not my personal taste of music, but it certainly had a lot of commentary about and it was because it was a street-driven genre. It reflected a lot of what was going on at that time. And then if you listen to the next year that followed that, really in the early to mid 80s, there was what we now refer to it lovingly and laughingly as the hair band era. But there were all those rock bands that we grew up with that came out of the Midwest, and they all lived within 200 miles of each other. A lot of them did, and it was really interesting how they influenced each other. But they had that Motor City attitude, and then the next time we saw it was, of course, in the early 90s, in the grunge era. And you might notice that each of these, they each have a geographical rooting as well. The grunge era was out of Seattle. The 80s was the hair bands were out of the Midwest, and then of course pop music today is largely driven by kids who have a different view of the world than we all did. But the overriding sentiment, I would say, is that music is a voice with a weapon, as a weapon, and weapons can be used for good or for bad. And you can largely tell by a lot of the lyrics whether music is being composed by their composers, sometimes for healing, sometimes to jab somebody. And it can be very transparent in the lyrics you read, and it's very reflective of what's going on in the world at the time. So you can track that through history. It'll be very interesting to see how this moment in time, the last few weeks, will be represented in the music that's starting to come right now.
Yeah, that's so prevalent, isn't it? And, having music that heals or jabs, I guess at times we need both, depending on what we think that the audience needs. What about you, Billy? Do you have any thoughts on approaching music from a healing or a jabbing perspective, perhaps, just to provoke thought?
Sure. I think it's kind of one and the same, because when your music is coming from a standpoint where you might feel like an attack, I mean, that's the result of turmoil, that's the result of pain, or it reflects a narrative that that people also understand on a large scale. So when it does jab, it's a form of healing, and when people react to it in that way, it just resonates on a level. So it's a little bit of both.
Yeah, and I'm going to jump to David now here. I'm just kind of jumping around the board a little bit, but because I want to hear something from each of you as much as possible, and I'm sure our audience feels the same. David, I once saw a clip of you talking about music related to colours and how it actually makes people feel through that, and especially through writing for film. So what do you think about the way that you compose and present feelings?
I think, I agree with what everyone has been saying, that music is a force for good, and it can be a force for evil is a strong word, but it can actually have it can work both ways. I was talking about, or referring back to what you mentioned, that video clip, that interview of the 80s. I was talking about, I was studying the relationship between basically synesthesia, where some people can see colours and shapes as they hear music, and as the brain responds to the sounds that are coming from the speakers or on your headphones, it can trigger completely random and sometimes uncontrollable images in your head. And I think that every now and then, even though I get lost in what I do in a kind of organic, natural process of creating music, I'm often reminded of the connection between music and mind and mood. And of course, that's what I'm doing, or I'm kind of utilizing that tool as a film composer, when I respond to narrative. And I think music, has been and always will be a soundtrack of our lives, as is often said. But I think also it does have healing powers. I saw a very interesting, speaking of Catalyst, I saw an interesting program called Catalyst recently, which talked about music being used in aged care facilities to stimulate people with dementia, because they actually have been doing tests and have discovered that music is more powerful than drugs in stimulating the neural cortex. And I think that speaks volumes about the power of music, whether it's used responsibly or irresponsibly. You know, an example of irresponsible music is using it to stir up feelings of fascism and national, an over important sense of nationalism and things like that. That's a misuse of music. But a positive use of music is to inspire people and to spread a message of love, peace, hope. All these things. It's a very powerful force for sure.
Yeah.
I'll pick up on what you just said, David, because my mom had Alzheimer's for many, many years, and in the last few years of the Alzheimer's, and it's a terrible disease, and it's very, very difficult, and it's very slow to attack their victims. But in the last couple of years of her sickness, she was unable to communicate. And one of the guys I was working with in the studio said to me, "Have you ever played her music? What's her favorite music?" I said, "She liked opera." And he says, "When you go to see her, the next time you see her, put headphones on her and play opera." I said, "She has not spoken a word. Nothing has come through her lips in 3 years." He said, "You do that." And I went there and I put headphones on, and I played her favorite opera, and she started singing it, which was incredible. So to your point, very, very good stuff, and it proves itself. You look at this app that's out there right now, Calm. Okay, the fact is that although there are a lot of sounds, there are also songs that are very soothing and healing. And there's another one out there there's another app right now being born called Q Therapies, where they're actually using what they call acouceuticals, not pharmaceuticals, where you actually can go through a whole list of different things that are bothering you. You could be depressed, you could have insomnia, you could feel agitated, and you can go through a menu of songs that you can play back that will be the antithesis that will be the remedy without using any drugs to whatever you're feeling at that time. It's pretty great stuff. Music is magic that way.
Wow, I got to get me some of that. I agree. I think that as artists and people who work in the music industry, we're really in a very privileged position, and we're very lucky to be able to use this to reach anyone that we want around the world and express and hopefully connect with people and help them feel something. I did have an experience working in a nursing home. I was asked to actually go and play for some of the residents there, and I was a very nervous first timer. I had my stand and my sheet music and my little keyboard, and I'd gotten halfway through the song, and one of the residents came up and stole my music. And that was the end of that career. But I tried. So Phil, when in your experience working with in the labels, and you've probably seen a heck of a lot of artists, how do you connect or identify what you feel is a compelling artist that you think you would like to share with the world? Is it a gut feeling, or what process do you go through?
How do I connect with them?
Yeah, how do you connect to then figure out, hey, I think this artist has something really special and meaningful to say to the world?
Well, as an example, when you run one of the big labels in the years where you're running a Warner Brothers or a Virgin, there's a big roster there, and the balancing act is, there's as you release music, there's always the struggle between art and commerce. When you get really lucky, a record comes along or a song comes along that is artistically beautiful, but also can do the business. But we've all had many records that are commercially successful, and none of us understand how or why. And then there are other ones that are just absolutely stunningly beautiful, and you can't get anybody to pay attention to it. The only person that pays attention to it is the music reviewer of a magazine, and you wonder, like, what am I missing here? But that's the balancing act, of course. But at the end of the day, for me personally, to answer your question, I listen with my eyes, and when I sit across from an artist and they tell me why they want to be an artist, and you meet a young kid, or you meet somebody who comes in, it's been at it for years, and they say, it's like oxygen to me, Phil. If I can't do this, I won't survive. And when you look in the eyes of somebody who says that to you, you just know whatever's going to come out of them is going to be important. And it's not going to be for everybody, and it may not be finished when it comes out, but it's, you have to pay attention to it, because that's where the magic happens, and that gets a lot of respect.
Mm, yeah, agree. So for you, David, and this might actually be quite relevant for you as well, Billy, but as someone who composes music, and specifically for you, David, the film scores that you've composed, was there ever a time where you felt like your creative approach was impacted or affected by current events? And speaking as an artist, there have been times where perhaps the business gets into my head, or you start to feel the competition or that kind of thing, and then that can really affect the way that you create. Was there a time that you felt that, David?
Oh yeah, I went through a period of. I always had a passion for composing music, and as a kid, I remember they used to have these shows on television in the afternoon on a Saturday called Epic Theatre, and they'd play these, old classic epic films. And I was watching a recently released in the late 60s film called Exodus, and it had a fantastic piece of music in it, and a most memorable theme. And I went to sit at the piano and play it. And I knew at that age of 7 that that's what I wanted to do all my life. I wanted to make music for film. Fast forward to going through various experimental periods of being a jazz musician, and then discovering rock and roll and popular music, and jazz, and all sorts of ethnic world music, and combining it all into melting pot. It was the passion that kept me going. And then fast forward to being in my early 30s, supporting a family, being a working musician for a living. And this is an interesting dilemma for a musician. How do I keep, and this can sneak up on you. You can sort of not lose your passion, but swing your focus from being driven to monetize your craft. And in a way that pollutes I think that pollutes the purity of an artist. I think that, I guess the pith of what I'm trying to say is this, that you write music because it comes out of you like a force of nature, and you want to express. As soon as you start thinking about the money it earns, and that sort of mentality pollutes the purity of the art. And I think it's important to be mindful of that as an artist. And you don't write music to be successful and to reach a lot of people. Of course, you want to reach a lot of people, but that should not be your primary goal ever. I think there's got to be a purity. And I think the really great music comes from that place of honesty in an artist, and it's just pouring out of their soul rather than looking for a reward of some sort.
Mm. How about you, Billy? Do you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny because sometimes when I'm talking to various producers or trying to figure out, what my next sound or song is, there's certain key phrases that I look for that I already kind of know this isn't going to really be a great collaboration. When someone starts saying, we're looking for a hit, we're gonna make a hit, the second I hear that word, I automatically know we're not really on the same wavelength. It is definitely a balancing act with art and commerce, but if you go into the process knowing that you are looking for that result, whatever you come out with is inherently, in my opinion, just, it's not authentic, and it'll read in the delivery. So I understand that pressure, but I personally have never felt it. I think if you're being true to yourself as an artist, and you're doing what you need to be doing, then out of that process organically, you will eventually find your hit. But if you go about it the other way, just to me, it doesn't work.
Just on that, I'm really glad that it hasn't affected you, because that's good news. What do you think that artists can do during this time to stay positive and take positive action in a really meaningful way?
Sure. Use your platform and use your voice. What's so amazing about the age that we live in right now is it doesn't really matter what size following or listening base that you have. Every single one of us has a platform through social media, through our phones, and you can connect to so many people through that. So I think the most important thing is continue creating, and just be honest, and don't be afraid to put your voice out there, because it's amazing how many people probably feel the same way.
Yeah, I agree. Do you agree with that, Phil?
100%. 100%, because you are, if you're an artist, you have to, you don't know how to speak any other way except from your own place. And you know, I worked with, I don't want to name any artists, but there was an artist who really taught me the real purpose, the real pain of a songwriter. And it was in the early 90s, and he was having trouble delivering. He had built a beautiful album, a fantastic record, but I felt like we didn't have the first single yet. And he was tormenting himself much more than I could torment him. And I really felt bad asking him for his first single, that we needed a more commercial first single, because he had worked so hard. But at the end of the day, he explained to me that he's the one who sat me down and he said, songwriting is an outlet for people in pain. And I just stared at him. And I said, what does that mean? He said, it's the release, it's the outlet, it's the channel that we can breathe through. But you have to, he says, so many of us have to write from such a dark place. And you may not be able to understand that, but I need you to hear what's coming out from that. And it was like an epiphany for me to understand what a songwriter sometimes goes through to birth a song.
Oh gosh, that's great. Birthing a song is right. I can speak to that quite personally. So I guess what I'd like to know too is, personally for each of you, was there ever a challenge that you went through where you felt like music was instrumental in helping you get through? I don't know if anyone wants to take that one. Does anything spring to mind?
Sure. I think all the time. I think, I mean, I went through a very difficult time at school because I was not your typical stereotypical sort of macho jock type person. I was quite a shy, awkward teenager, and very lacking in self-confidence. And I think music actually gave me an incredible, powerful sense of power, self-esteem, joy, and the ability to express. And when I realized that when I could play to an audience, or anyone who was listening, I felt I was communicating something, and it really helped transform me from probably potentially dark, depressive type person into someone who could function well. And so I owe a lot to music in terms of the power and the feeling of joy it's given me, to the empowerment it's given me. It's a wonderful, as Phil said at the beginning, it is a force for healing, and it got me through my late teens for sure.
Yeah, wow. Well, I'm glad about that, because the world would be a a sadder place without your music. Billy, how about you? Have you ever felt that as well? When music really helped you?
Sure. I think for me, it's more so in the creation of music. It's so cathartic for me. As a consumer, not as an artist, I rely on music for moments of euphoria and joy and hype and just all of those just amazing moments when you're just so grateful to be a human having this experience right now. I can't really recall too many instances where I relied on it for more turbulent times as a consumer. That tends to come out more so as an artist for me. It's healing as I'm in the process of exploring those feelings or experiences or whatever it is that I need to process. Yeah.
Well, how about your audience? I know you have a lot of friends out there. Has anyone ever reached out to you and said, "Hey, this song that you've produced has really affected me"?
Yeah, all the time, actually. My first single that I ever released is called Ocean Blues, and it handles mental health, depression, suicide. I had a friend in college who took her own life a few weeks before we were supposed to graduate. And the song wasn't necessarily about her, but it was just inspired by her in so many ways. And through that song, to this day, I think even just a couple of weeks ago, I had someone reach out to me and say that that song helps them through a similar situation. And I don't know how healthy it is, but I literally respond to almost every single person who contacts me. But for me, it's so important to make sure that my listeners know that I'm not just putting out music for you to consume. I am hearing you, I see you, I understand your struggle and your journey, and I may have been on that same path at some point in time. So yeah, I definitely get messages like that, and that just reaffirms the power of music and the divine beauty of what it is that I do. I love it.
Beautiful. And I won't tease you and test your breaking point here by telling everyone, "Hey, hit up Billy Bodega. She'll get back to you." You know.
Probably don't say that anyway.
Yeah. Oh, no one's listening. It's fine. It's just between us. Phil, what do you wish you had known at the beginning of your career?
That's a really good question.
Oh, gosh.
And a hard question.
Oh, well, I can always circle back round if you want to, but, I'm sure people would love to know, is there something that you wish you'd known when you were starting out that would have perhaps saved some pain or, gosh, God knows what?
I think that the thing that I've learned is that all music has some value somewhere to someone. And unfortunately, when you run a company, when you run a record company, sometimes you have to be the filter or the gatekeeper. That's a better word. Sometimes you have to be the gatekeeper. And I wish I knew at a very young age. I got it about midway through my very long career running those companies, but about halfway through, I learned how important it was that when a songwriter writes a song, it's like one of their children. And the more songs they write, the more children they have. And in my younger days of the careers of my career, I maybe didn't have that sensitivity when they came in with those songs, and I had a job to do and I did my job, but it wasn't until I really understood the beauty of composers and their compositions, and that that composers are divinely inspired. Full stop. They're different than everybody else walking around on the planet. They need to be treated differently.
Right. Well, so David, you're a composer. Shall we treat you differently? And what do you think about that?
Look, I feel very privileged to have found a vocation, and I'm really pleased to hear Phil use the word divinely inspired. I think we do owe a lot of. I think music speaks from, the authenticity of music is measured by the lack of ego in it, and I think the biggest challenge for an artist, and yet I think the natural ability of an artist is measured by their ability to get their personal feelings and their ego not out of the way, because I think it can actually be a sort of an interesting filter to allow what flows through to have a meaning and resonance for other people. But I think that connection to the divine, that, call it the universal subconscious, call it Mother Nature, call it the force that comes from through us all. I think it's good to acknowledge that, and I think it is a sacred thing. I think writing music is a sort of a sacred moment where you have to be very still, and it's a form of meditation, form of trance that you have to be in for the music to come out.
Yeah, and what do you think that you would have liked to have known when you were starting out? Is there any pearls of wisdom?
Yeah, I think is to trust that and to know that it's not what I'm describing, this feeling of trance and meditation, kind of spiritual rapture, sort of a moment of openness. Whether you believe it or not, it's real. And in fact, even if you don't believe it, and it's natural for everyone to doubt themselves and to doubt the process and say, surely that couldn't happen to me. But if you keep telling yourself that in the moments when you do doubt, it actually works. It's anyone who's had therapy will know that sometimes, the best way to work on something is to just keep telling yourself. Cognitive therapy, where you just keep convincing yourself that you can do it. And Tchaikovsky once said, when asked, how do you write music if the muses don't come? And his answer was, I sit at my desk at 10 o'clock every morning and the muses always come. And that's his way of saying, I just do it. I make the decision to be open. And, Jerry Goldsmith once said, if you can't think of anything to write anything. And that's what you do. You write anything. You write what comes out. Don't overthink it. Get out of the way. Let it happen.
Yeah, and it's actually said in the industry a lot. A writer writes. You don't write, you rewrite, and I think that's really good advice, actually, isn't it? So speaking of doubts, Billy, if you have doubts, how do you deal with those?
During the creative process, or just kind of at any step?
Whenever, as an artist, getting your art out there.
Sure. When I'm actually creating or writing my own music, usually, which happens for the most part, when I'm really locked in and I'm experiencing that euphoria, I don't really experience doubt. It's kind of this fearlessness where I just charge forward, and that's how I know that I'm actually, to what David said, that I have to keep going. So during the actual creative process, I don't really experience doubt, which I'm very, thankful for that. There are obviously so many moments as an artist where you do doubt yourself, but for me, those don't happen inside of the studio. They don't happen in the booth. That's kind of more so when the outside world and the business element and just some of, the internet can be cruel when some of those commentaries start seeping in. But as a creator, when I'm locked in that moment with the muses, so to speak, there is no room for doubt. It's fearlessness, and it's just acting on your instinct and charging full steam ahead.
Yeah, well, and there's always going to be critics out there, I guess. We can't please everyone, right? But how do you deal with that? Do you even read the stuff, or
In the beginning, I did, and then I just at some point realized I really don't care. I was about to say an expletive and just bleeped it out in my head.
But I wish you would. Come on, Billy.
Oh my God.
break the seal.
Yeah. Honestly, everyone has an opinion, and as you said, you can't please everyone. My purpose is to be authentic to myself, and hopefully along the process, if I am doing that correctly, people will join me in this journey, and that's really all you can hope for. Everything else is just secondary.
Yeah. David or Phil, how do you respond to your critics, or don't you? Either?
Yeah, I look at her. If you read a bad review somewhere, it's someone's opinion. You know, you can't please everyone, and it's the thing about music is that in some ways it's either connecting or it isn't. It's not that it's bad or you could have done better. I mean, an artist always feels like they could have done better. And what was that great saying? Art is never completed. It's just abandoned at some point. And so that means that we could always keep chiseling away and refining. When do you walk away? And then when you walk away, you know, of course it's not that you want gratification, but you just want to know someone's listening. And if I've read really bad reviews, I've never read something really bad, but everything I've usually read is to do with personal taste, and perhaps something that I've written has triggered something, you know, in themselves, a reflection of themselves that they don't like, rather than, you know, in other words, once you let it go, it's like having children. You raise them, you put them out in the world, and then once they're out in the world, they're on their own, and you know they've got to cope with what the world does to them. And that's the same with our music. We just let it go, and if someone wants to mangle it, tear it down, I mean, you know, we focus on the process, not the outcome. And the outcome is, will the audience like it? Who knows? But an artist should only ever focus on the process of creating, and lose themselves in that, lose their ego in that, and allow it to just flow.
Yeah, I think that's really good advice, especially for us creatives. It is a sensitive process. You know, we want to keep creating, right? Because that's what actually, I think, can help drive the world to a better place, you know. So with that, I think we have some questions from our audience. There's one from Scott Haskin, and he says, hi. He writes music for relaxation, meditation, sleep, birthing, etc., saying that his music has helped people. It is distributed to all the usual places, but he's wondering how else he could get it out there at a global level in a time of need to help people. Any suggestions? Perhaps this might be you, Billy, because you're very active on social media, I see. What do you think?
You can't let up. You have to keep, you know, shameless self-promotion, and the more people you want to get constantly back at the forefront. I mean, that of course, internet has made the process so seamless for independent artists to put out their music, but as a result, it's kind of become also a very crowded space and oversaturated at times. So sometimes getting your voice out there can be difficult, but you can't let up. Just keep at it. Keep doing what you're doing.
Nice. So I think we have one that's come in from Katie Robbins, who wants to know, outside of music, are there any cultural heroes that you think of often, especially lately? It could be authors or, you know, other creatives. What do we think? Heroes in our culture. It could be a songwriter, it could be a pop artist even. You know, there's lots of people are active now speaking out. Who do we think?
I think a guy like, Richard Branson is very established for business, but I think he's a guy, he's a guy I point to because I worked with him for a lot of years, and I always found that his criteria for success was to do the right thing. He ran businesses, he attracted talent, he was financially successful, at a young age. But you talk about a guy who is a cultural icon. He's a cultural icon in the manner that he creates his own following based on whom he is, not what he is. And I think that carries a lot of significance.
Sure. One of my heroes is Noam Chomsky, because he just tells it like it is, calmly, and he speaks the truth, and he has an enormous wellspring of facts in his mind about the nature of the world. And so I admire someone like that in their ability to just speak like a text. Their mouth is like a textbook. It's just a font of wisdom, knowledge, so perfectly articulated. And people like him and sort of Bill Gates too, who has used his sort of wealth and passion for good to help people. I mean, I think these are the sort of people who I find inspiring in their ability to communicate and to take an idea and to articulate and to act on it.
Who inspires you, Billy?
This might sound a little pessimistic, but I think actually right now it's just more so a reflection of where we are as a society. I really can't think of anyone that comes to the forefront of my brain that I look at as a hero right now. I think that we have this incredible opportunity where people want to see so much change that is long overdue. And maybe the fact that I can't think of anyone that I genuinely look at as a hero speaks to the fact that we need leaders to step up right now and reflect the changes that we know we deserve.
Just on that, I think how many individuals have stepped up now over the past few weeks, and I think that's inspiring. Perhaps it is, the people around the world who actually bring the change, not just the leaders, right?
Right, it's definitely from the bottom up right now, which is beautiful to witness.
Yeah, I agree. Phil, I think you would have seen a lot of artists going through the peaks and troughs of their careers. And this is a question from Dana Gugino. What advice would you have or have you had for artists who have been unable to work?
Who have been unable to work?
Yeah, so I guess now we have a lot of artists who are unable to work right now because live performance.
Unable to tour.
Yes.
Right.
Tour, collaborate even. What advice would you have?
There's two. I don't want to, because I'm not speaking to that person. I'd like to respond. I don't know exactly what the question is, but here's what I think the question is. I think the question is, aspects of the industry right now are limited. Like, let's say touring is very limited because there are no buildings open. There's nobody who's going to go to a show. It is what it is. But the part of you that's the artist never stops being an artist. So you never stop creating. You never stop being prolific. You never stop writing. You never stop composing. You never stop doing whatever it is that makes you the artist that you are. The way you channel it may change. So if the way you channeled it before was to tour or make records, and maybe the touring piece isn't there, but there's a surge in online or virtual performances right now, which there's an opportunity there. You may spend more time collaborating with other writers. There are a lot of writers that I deal with that have used the last 3 or 4 months to try different kinds of writing and different techniques and different things that they otherwise did not have time to try because they were on the treadmill of having a career. When an artist is on cycle, you're writing a record, you're producing a record, you're releasing a record, you're putting a tour together, you're going out and you perform your new album for 12 or 18 to 24 months, and you come back in, you catch your breath for 4 months, and then try and get prolific again, start the cycle all over again. So when the cycle is disrupted, it doesn't mean that you stop being an artist. It just means you need to rechannel your energy a little bit differently temporarily, and that's what I think the best advice is, to rechannel and be adventurous and do things you otherwise didn't have time to do or didn't have the scope to do. And now you have a moment where the world hits the pause button, and you as an artist get to explore and discover and be something different and be someone writing things that you otherwise wouldn't write.
Yeah, I think that's excellent advice. And speaking of touring artists, we have a question from Jimmy Amani, and it's for you, Phil. Can you give a POV, point of view, on the phenomenon of Josh Groban and his influence? Because he's massive, right?
He's massive, and Jimmy and I are very close friends, and he knows that I signed Josh Groban at Warner when I was running Warner Brothers, and Jimmy I think knows this story, but the way I signed Josh Groban is that we needed entertainment one night for a dinner I was being honored at, and at the last minute one of the male vocalists dropped out. We needed a vocal. We heard about this kid in the Valley who had a big voice. And at that point, it was the night before the show, and David Foster and I were putting a show together. So we asked Josh if he'd come and sing. And of course, he blew the roof off the place. And even though it was completely different than anybody expected, because you see that sweet face, at that time he was 18 or 19 years old that night that we had him come do that. And that he opened his mouth and that thing came out of his mouth that everybody went, what? It was like that voice. And I didn't, all I knew is that I was sitting at a table that had my wife at the time, my secretary at the time, and my mother. They were 20 years apart. One was 30, one was 50, one was 70. And almost on cue, all three of them burst out in tears the minute this kid opened his mouth. And I remember getting up in the middle of the dinner, walking over to Bob Daly, who was running the Warner Brothers music group. And I said, when this kid walks off the stage, I'm going to sign him. And he said, don't be ridiculous. How are you going to get this guy's voice on the radio? I said, I don't have the slightest idea. I said, and it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how I work it. It only matters what I just saw him do. And Jimmy knows that story. And what that taught me about the business is that number one rule in the music business is there are no rules. And if the shoe fits, wear it.
I'm so sorry.
I love it. I love.
Did you start playing tennis in the middle of that? What is that?
It's my bird.
Oh, mine is next to my desk.
What's your bird's name, Billy?
This is Lucrezia. Oh my God.
Hello, Lucrezia. Do you want to say hi to everyone?
Is that an Italian bird?
She's a singer too. Please don't get her started. Wow. I'm so sorry about that.
Oh, that is fantastic. What a good melody. I just heard that.
Yeah. There you go. Yeah.
It might even inspire David's next score or something, right? Lucrezia.
Yeah.
I love it. Maybe we can get a question for Lucrezia. But there was a part two to that question, Phil, from Jimmy. He's asking about the relevance today of the phenomenon of Josh Groban. What do you think there?
I think the relevance is that in the business we grew up with, which was very linear, everything had to fit into a format or a genre. When a new song or a new artist or a new track came in, it was like, well, what is it? Is it a rock record? Is it an urban record? Is it a crossover record? Is it a country record? Everything had to get put in a box. And I think that one of the things that's really exciting right now is that music. Ahmet Ertegun said to me when I was very young something that I think applies now more than ever, which is forget all the labels. There's only two kinds of music. It's either great or it's not. And that's what I think Josh Groban did for the industry. It didn't fit anywhere. It didn't fit a label. It didn't fit in radio. It didn't belong anywhere. It was a complete left fielder. But the simple truth is, people loved it. He loved performing it. They loved hearing it. And that's all we needed to know.
Yeah, And the proof is in the pudding, right?
Yeah, didn't need a format.
Yeah. From Gary Wilbert, how has hip hop changed the music industry? He's opened this question out to anyone.
I'll start as a non-exponent of hip hop, but a great appreciator of it. How I think it's changed the industry is it's really rammed up how kind of urban poetry actually has been given wings by the beats that are attached to it, and I think it's changed the way we perceive music. Music doesn't always have to be about melody. Even though obviously a lot of hip hop has melody components to it, but it's driven by the poetry, and I think that's made a huge change to how we perceive what music can be. So that's it. Yeah, it's giving wings to urban poetry and the emphasis on the words and the vernacular and the rhythm and the expression of that through words.
Anyone else want to jump in on that one? Lucrezia?
Right, she's on my head right now, literally. I think what's amazing is that hip hop really has become pop music in a very big way. Obviously, there's still pop too as its own genre, but hip hop is popular music, and sometimes it takes the form of obviously more lyrical messaging that comes through, and it's also sometimes more destructive. But as we said earlier, that too can be healing in its own way, being able to express yourself in that way. So, I mean, I don't, this would maybe be a question for David or Phil. I don't know if anybody at the onset of hip hop really thought that this would be the trajectory, seeing it become such a huge, massive force in music as it has become.
Phil, do you want to speak to that?
Like all other genres, like disco did in the 70s, and like grunge did in the 80s, it legitimized itself when it could pay for itself in the industry, but it legitimized itself with the fan much earlier than that, because the credibility came from anything that's driven from the street runs on credibility, and hip hop came from the street. So that's where the muscle was.
Another question for you, Phil. How has social media changed how major record labels operate? That's from Gary Wilbert.
Well, probably not going to be a very popular answer, but I'm going to give it anyway. I think that what social media has done for the record industry, the music industry, is that people now follow the number of impressions and the number of streams in the record companies, and that's how they scout A&R to a large degree, which to me is really frustrating, because when streams and impressions can be driven by a lot of different things. It's not always driven by a song or by a voice or by the talent of a composition, and that seems to have overridden the real A&R process that we all grew up with in the industry, where there was a real deep dive into finding out what somebody's talent was, what their passion was for songwriting. Go out and see them play, or bring them in the office and meet them and look in their eye and let them tell you why it was important to be what they needed to be. And sadly, I think it's cheapened it a little bit. And the good news is the bad news with social media when it comes to music. Social media democratizes music. Everybody can do it. Everybody, I could sing in the shower and put it online, and now I'm a composer putting up a composition. I have no business. I'm not a composer. I'm not a singer. I have no talent. I'm not good at any of that. But I'm just as available and able to find as Paul McCartney or John Legend or Lionel Richie. So what's the point? So that's the bad news. The good news is I'm able to put it there. The bad news is, what am I doing there?
Yeah, right. So, Billy, I don't know, do you want to speak about music and social media and the role it plays?
I mean, yeah, I mean, same thing. What's beautiful about it is also kind of its curse. It's made it accessible for everyone. So if you remotely have something that you want to explore, you can, and that's great. But that also means that it's incredibly oversaturated, and anyone can technically, get a couple of programs and a device and become an artist. So it's a blessing and a curse.
Mhm. Right. Yeah. How about you, David? Do you ever go on social media? I know it's a completely different kind of thing for you. You're much more in the, working with your clients, perhaps, or. But do you ever use social media to get some words out there? No.
No, I don't do social media. I'm anti-social, but not anti-social media. I just don't participate in it. It probably comes back from when my kids were, that was their thing, and I didn't want to intrude on their space. And then I got into the habit of not using or participating in social media, other than I do like going onto Twitter and reading, the hilarity that happens around Donald Trump and stuff. But I am not sort of, and I mean, it's scary. It's not actually hilarious. But anyway, but it's kind of amusing. So I don't participate in social media. However, I take the point that both Phil has particularly mentioned and Billy, is that what's happened with social media is it's meant that we are now assaulted with stuff all the time from everybody. And so it is a blessing and a curse. The blessing is that anyone can do it. The blessing is that we can get to happen upon something that by accident, just by going on the internet. The difficulty, and what time will tell, is people's ability to make their own decision about what's good. In the past, you had record companies, you had radio stations, you had publishers, you had purveyors of our culture helping us guide, sorting out shall we say, the chaff from the oats. And so now it's up to us to be discerning as consumers. And so time will tell as how good we are in being able to recognise what's good without perhaps always being helped in the decision of what survives. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's really potent, actually, that we are the ones who are filtering, and it's up to us to really make that judgment for ourselves, I guess. Beauty in that as well, because then it's empowering the individual. I think that we have time for one more question. And I'm going to choose this one because this guy has posted it in a couple places. So I really want to get it answered. We touched on this a little bit before. It's from Duron Talley. What is one piece of advice you wish someone gave you when you were just starting out in the music industry? So who would like to start? I can start if you like. I mean, I wish someone had told me to relax, but yeah, please, David, go for it.
I'll jump in and say I did get some great advice, and I'm so grateful for this advice. I was a teenager, and this older gentleman was playing the piano, and he was extemporizing. I'd never heard of that. He was just making up music on the spot. And I was so fascinated that someone could just sit at the piano and improvise. And I hadn't heard a lot of jazz or improvised music. And I came away from, it's not of advice, but it's like an axiom. He just said, make the piano your friend. And if it can be your friend, it'll always be there for you. It can reflect on you. It's a sounding board. And I can't remember exactly what he said, but it just made such a deep impression on me. And I think that's the important thing, is to love what you do and to be friends with your instrument of choice, whatever that is.
How about you, Billy? Any last pieces of advice?
That I've received or that I would give?
Oh, well, so what's one piece of advice that you wish someone had given you at the start of your career? Or any time, really.
Sure. I'm sure, of course, I did receive this advice at some point, but like all things in life, it takes you really coming to it on your own to understand it. But just to be fearless and to be unapologetic in whatever it is you want to say or do. Sometimes there's controversy around knowing, is this something I should delve into when I'm writing a song? Is this going to resonate? Is this going to sound insane? And just not even going through those series of questions in your head, just fearlessness and just do it.
Love it. Lovely. Fearlessly, Phil Q. Do you have a last piece of advice for us?
I don't take credit for this, but I'll tell you the best advice I ever got. I got when I was 23 years old from David Geffen. And he said to me, don't waste time on things that don't matter. Because time is the most valuable thing in the world, because it's the only thing you can't make more of.
I love it. Well, on that note, I'm afraid that's all we have time for. So Phil, Billy, David, and Lucrezia, thank you so much for your time today and for sharing your thoughts with us. It really has been an absolute...
Can we watch Billy's Bird a little longer?
Oh, yeah, I know. Isn't she cute? I love it how she does the 360.
You can see her tail just in the camera. I know.
Like a windshield wiper.
Yeah, basically.
And sorry, she did that on cue as well.
Yeah, she'll just continue rotating all day up here. So
that is so cool.
Thank you. I'm so sorry.
It is the coolest thing. Nothing to be sorry for. So to our wonderful audience as well, we hope you've enjoyed this happy hour. You'll be able to view the full session on YouTube tomorrow. Look out for the post on our social channels or a link in the webinar follow-up email. For our next session, we'll be discussing the balance of branding and artistry, so look out for details on that. As always, be kind to each other, stay safe, my friends, and we'll see you in 2 weeks for our next happy hour. Cheers.